It started as just another perfect night on The Tonight Show, until Ryan Gosling heard something that made him stop mid-sentence and changed everything forever. Studio 6B was alive with that sophisticated energy that came with certain guests. Tonight, Ryan Gosling was back on The Tonight Show to discuss his latest film and his unexpected journey into music. The iconic New York City skyline glittered through the studio's massive windows, creating the perfect backdrop for what everyone expected would be another thoughtful conversation filled with Ryan's characteristic quiet intensity and Jimmy's infectious enthusiasm. The audience was buzzing with excitement, filled with film enthusiasts and admirers of Ryan's versatile performances. Jimmy had been looking forward to this interview for weeks. Conversations with Ryan always had depth, touching on themes of artistic risk-taking and the vulnerability required for creative expression. What nobody noticed during the pre-show excitement was the man in row 5, seat 14. David Rodriguez, 45 years old, sat perfectly still in his navy blue cardigan, clutching a worn leather notebook against his chest. The notebook was filled with handwritten musical compositions, yellowed with age and worn from countless readings. For David, it contained the musical dreams of the father he'd lost just 6 months ago. David had won his tickets through a radio station contest. His sister Maria had been encouraging him to get out more, to find ways to honor their father's memory that didn't involve sitting alone in the garage, staring at the old upright piano that hadn't been played since the funeral. The notebook contained dozens of compositions that David's father, Miguel Rodriguez, had written over 30 years as a jazz pianist in small clubs around Brooklyn. Miguel had dreamed of writing a musical, of creating something that would outlive him, but life had gotten in the way. Miguel had been particularly inspired by La La Land, watching it dozens of times with David. "Mijo," Miguel would say, his eyes lighting up. "That's what music should do. It should make people feel like they can fly, even when they're standing still." The show opened with Jimmy's usual warmth and charisma, his genuine excitement about having Ryan as a guest, evident in every gesture. When he introduced Ryan, the applause was sustained, 200 people showing appreciation for someone who had become synonymous with both commercial success and artistic integrity. Ryan walked onto the stage in his characteristic understated style, wearing a simple black suit that caught the studio lights perfectly. He hugged Jimmy warmly, waved to the audience with his typical blend of confidence and humility, and settled into the guest chair with quiet presence of someone who had learned to be comfortable with both fame and vulnerability. "Ryan Gosling, everybody," Jimmy said, settling behind his wooden desk. "Thank you so much for being here. I have to start by saying your journey into music has been incredible to watch. From La La Land to your latest project, you've shown this fearless willingness to try new things. What draws you to musical storytelling?" Ryan smiled thoughtfully, that gentle smile that had endeared him to millions. "You know, Jimmy, there's something about music that cuts through all the noise. When you're playing or singing, you're communicating in this pure language that doesn't need translation. But I'll be honest, it terrifies me every time. There's nowhere to hide when you're behind a piano. It strips away all pretense." As Ryan spoke, his eyes naturally scanned the audience, a habit he developed from years of performing, and genuine curiosity about the people listening to him. That's when he heard it, a soft rustling sound, barely audible but distinct, paper being turned carefully, reverently. His eyes found the source, David in row 5, unconsciously flipping through the pages of his father's notebook, as if drawing strength from the musical notes written in Miguel's careful handwriting. Ryan's storytelling rhythm shifted slightly. Something about the older man's posture, the way he held that notebook, the careful attention with which he looked at those pages, spoke to Ryan in a language he recognized from his own relationship with music and loss. "Actually, Jimmy," Ryan said, his voice taking on a more personal tone. I'm seeing something in the audience right now that's reminding me why music matters so much. Jimmy looked curious, sensing that Ryan was about to take the conversation somewhere unplanned. Ryan stood up and walked toward the edge of the stage, his eyes finding David again. The gentleman in row 5 with the notebook. I can see you're looking at something musical. Are you a composer? David looked around frantically, pointing to himself with a shocked expression. The audience turned to look at him, and he felt his face flush with a mixture of surprise and something deeper, recognition that this moment was important. Somehow. Yes, you, Ryan said gently, his voice carrying that distinctive warmth that made strangers feel seen. That looks like sheet music you're holding. What's your name? David slowly stood up, his legs feeling unsteady. He looked down at the notebook in his hands, then back up at Ryan. David, he said, his voice barely audible, but carrying a weight that suggested the notebook meant everything to him. David Rodriguez. David, Ryan repeated, and something in the way he said the name suggested he'd already noticed something special about the man and his notebook. Did you write those compositions? David's eyes immediately filled with tears. He shook his head, clutching the notebook tighter to his chest. My father wrote them. He passed away 6 months ago. He was a jazz pianist. These are his songs. The studio fell completely silent. Something in David's tone caught everyone's attention. What kind of music did your father write? Ryan asked softly. Jazz compositions, David said, his voice heavy with emotion. He dreamed of writing a musical someday. He loved La La Land. We watched it together dozens of times. Ryan felt something shift inside his chest. David, when did you lose him? December, David whispered. Heart attack. He was at the piano when it happened. Jimmy walked down from the stage and joined Ryan. David, Jimmy said gently, have you looked at your father's final composition? David nodded, tears flowing. It's called Dreams Don't Die, but I can't play it. I'm not a musician like he was. I'm just an accountant. David, Ryan said, can I ask what your father would say if he could see you right now? David looked down at the notebook. He'd probably tell me to stop being scared and just try. He always said music wasn't about being perfect. It was about being honest. David, would you mind if I came up there and looked at your father's music? I have a feeling Miguel was onto something special. You'd really do that? David asked, looking amazed. I'd be honored, Ryan said, because I think your father's music deserves to be heard, and I think you're the person meant to share it. Ryan Gosling, one of the most respected actors and musicians in Hollywood, left the stage and walked into the audience. The cameras followed him, but everyone in the studio understood that this wasn't about creating good television. This was about something more sacred. Ryan reached David's row, and the people around them shifted to make space. He sat down next to David, and for a moment, an Academy Award-nominated actor and a grieving son sat together in the middle of a talk show audience, connected by the understanding that music transcends death. Tell me about Miguel, Ryan said simply. David's composure broke completely. He worked construction during the day and played piano at night. Small clubs in Brooklyn, wedding receptions, anywhere that would let him play his original compositions. He never got famous, never got recorded, but he never stopped writing music. He always said someday the right person would hear his songs. Ryan reached over and gently touched the notebook. May I? David nodded and handed over the notebook. Ryan opened it carefully, his eyes scanning the handwritten musical notation, the chord progressions, the lyrical fragments written in the margins. David, Ryan said, after a moment, this is extraordinary music. Your father had real talent. These compositions are sophisticated, emotional, beautifully crafted. David was crying openly now. Really? Really? Ryan said firmly. David, what would happen if you never shared your father's music? How would you feel in 20 years? David was quiet for a moment, considering the question seriously. Like I let him down, he said finally. Like I wasted the gift he left me. Then don't, Ryan said simply. Ryan stood up and addressed the entire studio. Everyone, I want to tell you about Miguel Rodriguez. He was a jazz pianist who spent 30 years writing beautiful music in Brooklyn. His son David is here tonight, carrying those dreams in this notebook. The audience was completely quiet, hanging on every word. Miguel believed that music should make people feel like they can fly, even when they're standing still. Ryan continued, your father's music isn't just notes on a page, David. It's love made audible. Ryan pulled out his phone. I want to connect you with my music producer. But first, would you be willing to play one of your father's compositions right now? David looked terrified. I can't play like you do. Miguel didn't care how you sounded, Ryan said gently. He cared that you were making music. Ryan looked at Questlove. Could we get David to a piano? What happened next was pure magic. David found himself at the Roots piano, with Ryan beside him and 200 people waiting to hear Miguel's music. What was your father's favorite composition? Ryan asked. Second Chances, David replied. He wrote it after I got divorced. He said everyone deserves a second chance at their dreams. David placed his hands on the keys and began to play. The melody was simple but beautiful, filled with hope and melancholy. His technique wasn't perfect, but the emotion was pure. As the notes filled the studio, you could feel Miguel's presence in every chord, his dreams living through his son's trembling fingers. As David played, Ryan began to hum along, finding the harmony. The Roots joined in quietly, their instruments weaving around the simple piano melody like a musical embrace. When the song ended, the silence was profound. Then the audience erupted in applause. But it wasn't just appreciation. It was recognition of something sacred they had witnessed. Ryan hugged David tightly. Miguel would be so proud, he said. That wasn't just a song, David. That was a father's love made audible. That was 30 years of dreams finding their voice. Like coming home, David said, tears streaming down his face. Like Dad was sitting right beside me, guiding my hand. Ryan turned to the camera. To everyone watching who's lost someone they love, please know that their dreams don't die with them. Those dreams become your responsibility to honor, to continue, to make real. The show ended differently that night. Instead of the usual quick goodbye and credits, Jimmy made an announcement that would change how the Tonight Show approached inherited dreams and family legacies. Tonight, we learned something important from David Rodriguez and his father, Miguel. We learned that the greatest gift we can give our parents isn't perfection, it's continuation. It's having the courage to carry their dreams forward. Ryan added his own message. And we learned that talent isn't about technical perfection. It's about emotional honesty. David played his father's music tonight, not because he's a professional musician, but because he understands what Miguel was trying to say through those notes. David Rodriguez returned home to Brooklyn the next day, but he left New York with something he hadn't had in months: purpose. Ryan's producer contacted him within a week, and they began the process of professionally recording Miguel's compositions. 6 months later, the Miguel Rodriguez Songbook was released as a jazz album featuring David's simple piano arrangements, accompanied by professional musicians who understood that sometimes the most beautiful art comes from the most honest places. Ryan kept his promise in ways beyond just making connections. He became an advocate for preserving family musical legacies, speaking out about the importance of honoring the artistic dreams of those we've lost. The worn leather notebook that had contained 30 years of Miguel's musical dreams was professionally preserved, but David had it digitized so that Miguel's handwritten compositions could be shared with music students and aspiring composers around the world. But perhaps the most important change was in David himself. He learned that honoring his father's memory didn't require him to become his father. It required him to become the best version of himself while carrying his father's dreams forward. Understanding that Miguel's music wasn't meant to end with him, David started giving piano lessons to adults who thought they were too old to learn, teaching them the same lesson Miguel had taught him, that music isn't about perfection, it's about expression. He called his teaching studio Second Chances Music, and he dedicated every lesson to the idea that it's never too late to honor the dreams we've inherited. The Tonight Show episode featuring David's performance became one of the most watched segments in the show's recent history. Music schools across the country reported increased enrollment from older students who had previously been discouraged by their age or lack of formal training. Record labels began actively seeking out family musical legacies, understanding that sometimes the most compelling art comes from the interaction of loss and love, of inherited dreams and personal courage. But perhaps the most important change was in families themselves. Parents began sharing their artistic dreams with their children more openly, understanding that legacy isn't just about what we accomplish, but about what we inspire others to continue. David started a nonprofit called Dreams Don't Die, helping families preserve and continue the artistic legacies of deceased relatives. He became an advocate for the idea that creativity doesn't end with death. It just finds new hands to express it. And Ryan Gosling learned something that reinforced everything he believed about artistic courage. Sometimes the most important thing you can do for someone is help them understand that they don't need permission to honor the dreams they've inherited. The piano in the Tonight Show studio became legendary among the staff. They started calling it Miguel's piano, and whenever they had shows about family, legacy, or overcoming loss, musicians would play it with extra reverence, understanding that some instruments carry the dreams of people who never got to hear their music played for an audience. Miguel's notebook wasn't just a collection of compositions anymore. It was proof that artistic dreams transcend individual lifetimes, that love expresses itself through melody and harmony, and that sometimes the most beautiful music comes from the courage to continue someone else's song. It wasn't just late-night television that night. It was a masterclass in how to honor inherited dreams, how to find courage in grief, and how sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply sit down at a piano and let love guide your fingers across the keys. Dreams don't have expiration dates. They just wait for courage. And in Studio 6B, David Rodriguez learned that his father's music didn't die with Miguel. It was just waiting for David to find the courage to let it live again.